Mm.
What another day that the Lord has made. I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it because it's the Bad Men for Christ show coming at us 7:15 live and direct from our homes wherever we are into your homes wherever you are. We are so grateful for another show to be able to come here today. So what a day, what a day, what a day. I am your co-host, Rupert Johnson. With me is my buddy and co-host, Mark Brodus. Our third co-host, Paul Brown. We don't know where he is.
We know he's resting.
Well, you can say he's resting. I heard he went to Jamaica and he came back and he caught it cold. How do you go to a tropical island and come back with a cold? I don't know, but hey, man, he's my brother, so we're praying for him. Hope he feels better. But we are so grateful. Mark, how are you doing today? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Today was our kickoff celebration for our pastor, our presider's 30th church anniversary. And
Wow.
we had Bishop Horace Smith from Chicago came down and just tore the church up, man. It was a beautiful celebration today.
Wow. Well, yeah, you know what? I can't wait to wait. I wasn't invited.
And you invited, it's all on social media. So we can't say
I
you did
wasn't.
not get
No,
that invite.
hold on. My name is Rupert Johnson. They know
That's
who I
right.
am. I don't have to go to social. If I have to go to social media to get my invite, that hurts even more.
And
Hurts even.
one of our brother Tony from Transformation down in Georgia, he even came up for it. So now he saw it. So hey, okay.
He might have been invited. Somebody might have called him. But no, but it's all good. It's so great. We actually came back from our workers conference. I saw Bishop.
Yeah.
It was great. I saw Lady Winston was awesome, and all the other bishops. Awesome workers conference. We learned so much.
Yeah, and I
Kudos.
heard that you tore up down there, man.
I'm sorry.
I heard that you tore up down there in your session.
I didn't tear up. It was a awesome Thursday night worship service.
Mm-hmm.
The church was so well
humble.
in worship
So
mode, bro.
So
We
humble.
were in worship mode. That's all that happened. Worship mode. And you know me, I love running with the flow. So I was running with the flow. So it was just great. But it was awesome workers conference. Kudos to those folks in Norfolk and the church there at End Time and Pastor Paul Wilson and his crew did an awesome job putting his conference together, and all those that worked with him, whether they were from that church or not. It was an awesome time to all the facilitators. It was really great. You were missed, my brother. I thought I was going to see you there, but I know that you guys are busy right now in full swing of things, so it's a little bit more difficult.
Amen. Well, I heard it was a great conference, and of course, Bishop and Lady Wynn was talking about it today, so we're grateful.
Yeah, Bishop brought up the fact, maybe we got to talk about this one day, but he brought up this point that he says, in the midst of chaos, there is a blessing. And I was like, yeah, that's cool to hear. Yeah. In the midst of chaos, there's a blessing. So that's a great thing. But today, we're going to get a little bit deep today. So first, I want to welcome all of our watchers, those that are watching now, those that will be watching, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube, and reminding everyone, you can ask your questions by typing them in the comment section, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube, and we will see them and we will respond to those questions. We look forward to responding to your questions. So, but today's a little bit of deep topic because we may touch some points that might be a little bit, but it's going to be fun to talk about, and we really want to hear people's points, but we're going to talk about the government and the church. How do we really, or how do we interfere? I can use that word with one another, or should we, in case of interfere? So the first question I have for you, my brother, is the church supposed to be getting involved in different governmental issues that affect the church directly, whether it be school, finances, home, prison system, LGBTQT, anything like that? Should we be getting involved? Then we'll get into some deeper topics.
We can, but currently the law prohibits the church from doing a lot, especially if it's a 501, was a C3 or something like that's involved in it. So it basically puts up a barrier, because it's like you can't have political campaigns, you can't touch certain things. It's just that the way how the law now is really messing with the church, and that's the whole thing we're talking about a while ago about church and state and so forth. So the church somewhat has its hands tied, if you will, when it comes to certain things.
Well, Mark, should the church be talking? Should we be talking political stuff from the pews?
I don't think we should be. I don't think. Now, if you were to come, if I'm a preacher or pastor, if you come to my house, I'm going to talk to you all I want. But across the pulpit, it's a challenge because of the laws that the land has set. I agree with the one I think we should be. But again, we've heard about how some churches have, been reprimanded for just preaching something that's political. I mean, well, let me put it this way. I guess maybe you could, as long as you're not preaching to endorse a certain candidate. Maybe. I'm not sure.
Well, I was going to say Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist preacher. His messages, those were messages. A lot of those speeches, we say there's these speeches. No, they were preached messages that he had preached from pulpits. And they were a political stance against some of the things against our people. Right. And against getting a more of equality going throughout the country. Those things were preached. When Obama ran for office, I'm sure a lot of those black churches said something. They may not have said vote for him, but I'm sure they said something about that. So is it the church's responsibility to discuss? Now here's a problem that I may have, right?
Okay.
Me as a pastor, I'm going to favor somebody.
Well, of course you can. Yes.
I'm going to favor somebody. So am I speaking about who I favor from the pulpit, or am I speaking about who was the candidate that best characterizes the views and values of the church? Because that might speak to two different things.
Well, to your point, because you can say about someone who speaks the values to the church, but it may not be someone that's in your political party. So that brings about a division right there. So even though this person may say, okay, well, he's standing for the church, but that really doesn't mean anything to someone who may be on the other side. So that's where the challenge comes in. And as you being a pastor, I know it is a challenge where you're not really going to speak about who your candidate of choice should be, but you will encourage them to educate themselves on the political system so that you are trying to choose the correct candidate. That's one thing I believe with you. I'm pretty sure that's something you would do across your pulpit, is have your people educate themselves so you're trying to make the right decision.
Yeah, I think that us as the church, we should put into the system, just like you said, educate yourself. Basically, the person you think that you want to be this, whatever it is, governor, congressman, senator, state, president, whatever it may be, to educate yourself on their political views, and then see how they line up against the political views of Christ. Because we have political views. The church has a set of rules and regulations that we want to follow, and how we govern ourselves. So see how they follow, and then vote based on your heart, what you think. If you have questions, feel free to ask me, but I will, of course, give you my opinion, and it may not be right what you think. I would also suggest that there's a couple areas that you may want to focus on. Social justice, of course, equality, of course, and the last one is financial. I would vote those three things. And the reason why I put financial in there is because when Jesus was asked, do you pay taxes to Caesar? Jesus' response was, give Caesar just what is due Caesar, right?
Mhm.
If you're supposed to get the government taxes, give them their taxes. And we
Right.
have to know about that. Now, what we want to know is how those taxes will align with our money. How will those taxes affect what we do? How will Social Security affect what we do? And let's talk about Social Security for a second. Should the church, because right now they're getting into how to handle Social Security, letting individuals do it if at all possible. How should the church answer that question? Because there's going to be people who don't know how to balance or manage money, and they might even have a harder time having Social Security if we don't do something. Does the church need to create financial education
I
on
was,
those separate things?
I was going to say that, with you being in a finance background, that's something I think the churches should have on the table. Have that program already established to help those who are maybe going down that road to get their Social Security, know the do's and don'ts, know what you can and cannot do. So that way, when it comes to actually signing that document stating you want to start receiving Social Security, if Social Security still be around by the time we get it, that's another story by itself. Make sure you have everything in place, because it all goes back to education. If you're not educated in something, it's going to mess up, because people can. I was listening to the radio on my way to church today where they were telling people, be careful if someone calls you saying they're with the Social Security office, telling them that you need to do such and such. Social Security would not call you on the phone. And for them to try to target, especially seniors, again, not being educated, seniors tend to fall for traps like that, because like Social Security's on the phone. Okay, I got to give them X, Y, and Z. So again, education is key. Realize, in fact, Social Security is not going to call you on the phone. IRS is not going to call you on the phone. They're going to send you a written documentation for you to follow up, and then they give you a number on that document for you to call them.
Yeah. So first, the government's never going to call you. They're not a collection agency. They're not going to call you, and they're not going to say to you, "What is your address? What is Social Security number?" Because they already have it.
Right.
So why would they be calling you for that? And why are they going to try to verify it's you? That way, they might verify by Social Security number. They're not going to ask you for your address and your routing number and all these different things. So never fall those traps. But you saying that gives me a thought that we may have to have the church or some system. There's people listening right now that might not be pastors, but you're in the church. You may want to create a information center, especially when it comes to certain governmental issues like Social Security, because it is to be known that Social Security you can get as early as 62. But based on the year you're born, your max Social Security comes at a later age. At one point, it was 67, and then I think for me, it's like 69 something. But you can get your Social Security max at that age. Now, you have to ask yourself the question, how long do you think you're going to live? How long do you think you can work for? If you don't want to work past 62 and you think, well, I can get my Social Security at 62, I'll do that. But when you're 70, that number that you're getting may not be as much money as needed. And it might have been better to wait and work a little bit longer and get Social Security at a later age, because it's more money at that point in time. You should also know Social Security is based on an average salary.
Exactly.
It's not based on this number. So if your friend is getting $3,000 a month and you're getting $1,000, it's because your friend made a lot more money than you did. So they put a lot more into the system. Also, you should know Social Security is not based on what you give today is what you get back. That's not how it works.
Nope.
The money that we are paying Social Security right now is paying Social Security for those who are receiving it right now. Just like our children and our children's children will be paying into our Social Security recipient, and they'll be saving up a number for theirs in the future. So when Mark said, is it going to be there? It really depends on how many people are actually working.
That's right.
So it depends on the more folks that are working, the better. That's why unemployment rate is so important, not just because it keeps America working in taxes, because a lot of things that you pay for today are paid out immediately.
Well, I have a question for you. Again, speaking of government, the whole thing about family, how government has a way of trying to move into the family. The Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Woo!
So in today's setting, a lot of people do not discipline their children of the fear of, if they discipline their child, they may get arrested. Or their child may be taken away from because of being disciplined. But in the church, we're like, nah, tear that little butt up. If you act up, because I remember thinking about my son sometimes when I was up in the pulpit, I'll look out in the congregation and I'll see my wife yanking him up, taking him out. Go, oh Lord, what did that boy do now? Because it was like, we didn't play that. You conducted yourselves in a certain way in the church. You conducted yourself a certain way in the school. You conducted yourself a certain way, because if you didn't, when you got home, you were going to get it. But society now says, oh no, give them time out. Oh no, let them just sit in the corner. No. You come to the school of Brodus, house of Brodus, it's going to be a different story. But the government says you can't do that. So you being a pastor, how do you deal with that? Because we know the Bible says, you're going to spoil the rod. You're going to spare, if you missed out the rod, you're going to mess the child up. So you got to make sure you're doing what God tells us to do.
Yeah. I think I am. Let me see. This is something that's coming in from Deborah Johnson. I'll get to your question. Let's talk to this. Is the average of your Social Security payment the average of your last few years you work? Yeah, sort of. Yes and no. Is New Jersey corporal punishment, or should be? Okay, we'll talk about that after your question. Let's talk about that's corporal punishment. So, to your question, Mark, I think that we have to look at it in a very distinct way. Unfortunately, the government is causing higher crime rates. It's causing more dysfunction. The reason why kids are shooting in schools is not because, we always say there's no prayer in schools. I don't agree. I think it's because there's no hope at home where I can discipline my child.
Every time there's a test, there's prayer in school. Every time there's a test, every time there's a test, there's prayer in school. Somebody's praying.
They're praying. They think they can lock their door. I remember growing up, and I even said in my house, you don't pay rent. You live in here by my grace, and you don't lock your door. You don't lock doors in this house, right? So you're not locking me out. And I remember having one time I had to bust out the door because they locked their door. I'm like, I'm having it here. And but they think they have. You can hear kids now say, "I have rights." No, you don't. You have lefts. You have lefts. I can leave you behind. I'm not leaving you behind. I'm choosing not to leave you behind because I'm a good parent. But you don't have rights. You're 12, 13. I've got to feed you. If I don't feed you, then I'm looked upon wrong. I've got to clothe you. If I don't clothe you, I'm looked upon wrong. I'm doing all these things. I do know that, Deborah. We're going to get to it. So we do all these things because we are required, but it's not really required. We're doing it because we love you. You're our child, so we're doing them. The government wants to tell you or make you think that you have some rights, but you don't, because what will happen is once we fail being parents, they will take you away, and all those rights that you had are now taken away. Now they move you into an institution that you are now waiting for somebody to come get you.
Right.
So where you lose all rights. So the government wants to fool you into thinking that. That's how, I don't know how you look at it, but that's how I look at it. And
100%.
So do I spank my children if I have to? Yeah. And I tell them, as soon as you want to call 911, go ahead, because you'll be taken away. You're going to be taken away. So if you want to go to somebody's house's house, you call 911. You do that. And they don't. Because at the end of the day, they know you love them. So that's not what they'll do.
And one thing I'm not boasting or bragging about how Anita and I raised our children. We've never had a situation where our kids had temper tantrums. We didn't play that. When I go to the store and I see some child falling out, I say, oh, everything within me has to be under control, because I can't stand when I see a child falling out because they can't get their way. It's like, no. But again, that goes back to certain ways how people are afraid to discipline their children in public. Because again, if I discipline them in public, they may call the authorities on me. It's like they're scared.
Yeah,
That's just my observation.
I agree with you, man. That's big for me when I see somebody throw. And it's not just the child throwing, because my children are throwing temper tantrums. It's them throwing a temper tantrum and you do nothing about it. You sit there and watch the child, or you try to talk to them. Come on, Timmy, behave yourself. You know, no. I be yanked kids, and even and as a, I've been fortunate, right? Because I'm a pastor who I love kids. I love parents who bring their kids to church. I love them. They cry, they make noise when their parents about to get embarrassed. No. That's what children do.
Right.
That's not an issue. Right. What I don't want you to do is sit there and let them make that noise.
Right.
And let them not be disciplined. You tell them, quiet, or you walk them downstairs. I've picked up kids. I've walked the parents who their kids were crying, and I picked the kid up and put him on my shoulder while I'm preaching.
Wow.
Because I want them to know I love this child. But there's a way that we teach these children how to behave. And whether you do it in church, school, or for me, it was everywhere. If I was wrong in school, then my teachers knew they could call my house and I was getting it. And that was a benefit. We can't do that today in school. Teachers can't call somebody's home. The parent gets mad.
Right.
We're calling your child's misbehaving. We're trying to help educate your child. We call home to let you know as a parent, you need to correct this. You get mad at me for calling home as a teacher. It's ridiculous.
Right. And did you see that article? Speaking of that, the article the other day where this student knocked his teacher out because she took away his what was his PS5, a gaming system.
Oh yeah.
The teacher. I'm like, my gosh.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? And that's why kids feel it's okay to bring a gun to school and to shoot their teacher, because there's no respect for their teacher, right? So I think that it's stupid. But let's get to Debbie's point about the excessive corporal punishment, right? So New Jersey, I don't know about Maryland, but New Jersey allows parents to use reasonable discipline when it comes to corporal acts of punishment. Unreasonable or excessive corporal punishment, however, is illegal and can constitute child abuse. Now, the question is what line is it that you cross when they're called excessive, right?
I guess back in the day when you go get one, my mom said, go get the Switch. One of them nice, fresh green ones. The one that little flex to it.
Don't you dare bring that
today down there.
Don't you dare bring that stick that breaks on the first hit. Don't you? You're gonna go out there. You have to get that one that's flimsy, like a wave, like you said, green. So don't break that. Oh my Lord! Don't do that one.
It just made me think about my childhood real quick. Oh.
But today, try that today.
Oh man!
Oh my God!
That would probably classify as corporal punishment.
that would definitely. The way we used to get beat back in the day. Today you couldn't do it.
No, you couldn't.
You might be able to get a good 1 or 2 spankings on a child. You have to better stop.
Right.
You couldn't get those laid. I mean, and you laid on the ground. You're just like, I can't go anywhere. I'm done.
I don't know if your parents are like mine. My mom would say, my dad would say, shut up if I give you something to cry for. I'm crying because you just beat me. That was the number one parent statement. Jay Frankie give something to cry for. I'm already crying. What do you mean? What do you mean? You're sitting there with a super looking face. Trying to hold it back.
Yeah, that was most ridiculous. But today, that would probably constitute corporal punishment.
Absolutely.
That would constitute corporal punishment. So to say to Deborah, or should be, unfortunately, it's hard to draw that line between love and abuse. It's hard to say this is love versus this is abuse, because you do have those drunken parents who come home and beat the heck out their kids.
That's true.
And and leave bruises on them. And that's abuse. But they also have these younger parents that come home, don't leave bruises on their kids. They know how not to leave bruises on their kids, and they beat them badly, and their kids are traumatized because they are abused.
And then
so
it's also verbal and psychological abuse is there too.
Oh yeah,
that verbal abuse goes deep down within.
Yeah, and the government steps in and tries to define those lines. It is not fair because as a parent, I'm trying to keep my child out of a different system.
Right.
Right. I'm not worried so much about the juvenile system because my child's not going to be in the juvenile system. I'm worried about the system my child can get into once they leave my home and they're on their own, and it's the penal system.
Right.
That's what I'm worried about because I'm training my child to be respectful to those around them, to who they are, to what they want to become, and be a good law-abiding citizen. And yet you're not giving me the opportunity to do that because some children you just cannot. Now, some you can talk to, some you can have a good conversation, and they will listen. But some like me, I was smacked from the age of 8 to 11. I must have been smacked by my mom every day because I was just mischievous. So every once in a while she had to remind me, boy, stop. Because I was mischievous. Right? Now here's Debbie making a point. Debbie being our political activist today. I thought this would be Ken coming from Ken, but it's coming from Deborah. In poor neighborhoods, right? It's considered abuse. And we got to talk about this. In the suburbs, it's poor parenting. But now I want to say even that it may be even race, right?
I was going to think that yes.
A black parent, a Hispanic parent, one of the minorities, it's abuse. But when it comes to the Caucasian, the Europeans, it might be called poor parenting. It's almost the same thing where we had opioid syndrome, right?
Right.
We've always been talking about drug abuse. It's never became an issue or a national governmental issue until it hit the suburbs and hit. But even though it was there, but because there was no of the Europeans yelling and screaming about it, it was only the blacks screaming about it. It became an issue. Now it's just a turn of event, right? Now that more they see the abusiveness in the white community. Now it's more so. Oh, it's just bad parenting. Oh, you didn't check up on your child, so they went to the school and you notice most of those shooters, they're not black. There's a few of them. Most of those shooters come from nice homes, two-parent homes. They're not single-parent homes. They're two-parent homes coming from nice neighborhoods, going to schools in nice neighborhoods, doing the mass shooting. Why? Because the parents aren't paying attention, and now it's considered poor parenting. But that could also be abuse because neglect, like you said, emotional,
yes,
neglect. Those are things that were not part of minority homes. You rarely got a child that was emotionally, verbally, or not. I wouldn't say physically, but because you had the drunken parents, you had those that were on drugs, but the two-parent homes that if a black child was in, it was rare that they got that much on the emotional, the physical power possibly, but emotional, mental, not really. So they weren't going in there with their mind. They didn't go in crazy. They didn't go in crazy. Where now you're going into crazy.
So is the church today still class? Back in the day, they say the church was, classified when you say sanctuary, that if someone is running down the street from the police and they run into the house, it's a safe haven, and the police can't come in and take them out because they're inside of a safe house. Is that always true? Or is that not necessarily true?
Say it again. I'm sorry.
So let's say a criminal or someone is running down the street and they decide to run into the church and they start to talk to you, and the police are right behind them. They're trying to come in there too. Can you stop the police from coming into your church to get this person? Because now this person is now in your comfort, confiding you to what took place.
Our church is still safe havens. That's a good question. It doesn't have any legal effect anymore.
Ah, wow.
So traditionally, yes, you can
Hmm.
run into a church and call safe haven. If the police officer is not aware of the rules or the laws, they may permit it, but it is not really a law anymore. So it cannot be something that you can say, oh, I have safe haven, I have safe haven. No, legally they can still come in and take you away. And
Wow.
that I think is because that probably is a now I don't do this much. So when I say this, I probably am very serious. This is probably a black thing. So,
Mm, okay.
so this what I will say is probably a black thing. Because a lot of times, especially during the civil rights movement, right, they would run into the church,
Yeah.
the black church, and they were able to find sanctuary. So they
Right.
said, okay, you know what? We've got to stop this from happening. There's criminals, drug dealers, blah, blah, blah. Going, let's cop this. But if you notice, right, the biggest crime, one of the biggest crime syndicates in the world, the mafiosa, they're very religious.
Yes. Very much
So
so.
I'm sure that during the times when they ran there, no one was saying anything. It wasn't
Correct.
until probably young black men were going there that they started this issue. I feel that. So yeah, I would go with that. That's
So
what I feel.
that so that'd be something the government pretty much has got distinguished in. What you think?
Yeah, I think that the government has made its call
Hmm.
on what they feel should be and should not be
Okay.
on that issue. And again,
Hmm.
that's a race. I feel that's a racing. So what does the church do? Does the church? And again, this is what the so Mark, what does a church need to do? Because, like you said, there's a 501c3, right?
Right.
There is this big overcrowding issue that the
Right.
government, if they wanted to, they can take that away.
Take it
And
away.
trust me, they're trying to,
Right.
right?
Bit by bit.
Mainly because there are millions of dollars flowing to the church that they could tax, that they would want to tax.
Right.
Um, so you have this issue. I will answer that question in a second. You have this issue about this 501c3 hanging over your head for your
Hmm.
tax exemption. When you have to pay taxes, money comes into your church, into your pulpits, and you
Hmm.
don't pay taxes. And I have my own thought on that when it comes to bigger churches versus small churches. We talked about it before.
Right.
We we don't try to fight for certain things because we're afraid that that's going to be taken away. We're not
Mm.
fighting for the right to be a sanctuary. We're not fighting for a right for prayer in school. We're not fighting for a right to be able to mobilize certain things in the community if needed through the church. We don't have a right to have a lobbyist in the U.S. government like everybody else is a lobbyist in the U.S. government.
Hmm.
We don't have those rights. Why is the church so scared to fight and possibly lose a 501c3 when some of these things might be more important when it comes to our spiritual move? Why?
Well, you said right there, they're afraid to lose that tax status. And I'm wondering if that tax status was not hanging over their head, if they would be more vocal, if they would be more proactive in making sure things are done in their community in a way that's such that the barrier is no longer there. I'm often thinking about what the Bible says, profit man to gain the whole world and lose their soul. So if the church is not, well, I think it was Bishop Saunders made a statement long ago. If your doors of your church are shut up right now, will they even notice that you're gone? you know and I think about that. Do the people really want your church in their community? I mean, is your church really being effective? So I think about that. If the church is really effective in the community, they'll do whatever it takes to make sure they meet the needs of the people, whether the government say you can't or whether the government say you can. That's how I look at it. I could be wrong, but that's how I look at it.
So I just looked at the history, right? So the tax exemption didn't start till 1954. So
Okay.
we see churches were much more active
Back then, yeah.
prior to 1954. And so we can see that it's definitely something to do with the tax exemption rule,
Yep.
right? And the question was asked, are there certain things that we cannot preach about? I don't really know if there's certain things that we cannot preach about. I do know that there are certain things that we are not permitted to say one of the things. Political parties was one of them. Speaking, political parties.
Right.
I don't know if there's other things in the works that we can preach about. I don't know if maybe if our producer will look up and see if there's a list out there, things that a church cannot preach about based on a 501c3 certification. I don't know. But does the church need to say, forget this? This is more important. Should the church say, forget this? This is more important.
I think they should. I mean, again, if you're trying to cater to the needs within your community, sometimes you just got to say no to certain stuff and make sure it happens. That's how I look at it. Get beyond the bureaucratic stuff and just do what you need to do to make sure the needs are met. That's just me. I'm not a pastor, so I can say that. I know your hands are tied when it comes to certain things, but I look at it this way: do what you got to do to meet the people.
It's so strange because it's a scary thing because again, the tax exemption is great when you can buy stuff for the church and not worry about sales tax. It's great that that you don't have to have huge accountancy bills because you're not worried about having to pay taxes every quarter and things like that. And again, it saves you a ton of money because if they put a 15 to 20% tax rate like they do for corporations, you make $100,000 as a church, you lose 15,000. That's a lot of money being gone, especially when you're a small church. That's a lot of money that you lose to the government, and you do not know if the government's going to put it back into you. That's the biggest thing I think that scares leadership is that if I had to pay taxes, one thing. But will the government then put that money back to work for faith-based churches and for churches that are needed of those funding? Because now it's still hard for churches to get loans. It's even harder for churches to get loans now than it was 25 years ago because banks don't want to give churches loans. You go to some banks, they tell you straight up, if you're a church, I'm not giving you a loan. You have to create a small business outside of the church, an LLC, a corporate, S corp, to be able to get funding from banks because they don't want it because they're not even mortgages because they're like, we don't want to foreclose on a church. It's bad publicity. So all those things we have to kind of deal with. Now, once again, go ahead before I get them.
Well, you just said something about, bad publicity. I'm already thinking about now what they're doing to, Pastor Marvin Winans' church, Perfecting Church in Chicago, how they're going to sue his church because he has not done what the church said they were going to do. So he has this big, huge structure, mega church, and our producer can fact check that for me. Have this big, huge mega church that's just sitting dormant right now because they're still waiting to do stuff. But now the city is suing his church because it has not done what they said we're going to do. Do you think that's right? I don't think so.
Well, what they said they were going to do, first of all, depends on what they said they were going to do. They said they're going to do. Do you know? Is anybody know?
I have to look it up right now. But I just remember reading an article. It was a while ago. He got this big mega church built. Right now it's still empty, but the city is suing him. Matter of fact, they put the lawsuit against him because he has not done what they said they were going to do.
So if we look it up real quick, being sued by city. Let me see if I can find it real quick. The city of Detroit the city of Detroit is suing the Perfecting Church after they say they failed to complete a mega church project in a timely manner. Perfecting Church, which is led by Bishop Marvin Winans, was set to build a new church ministry building and park near 7 Mile and Woodward. And we're nearly 20 years after the plans for the project were announced. The project remains unfinished. Wow. This was all prior to Amazon. This was all prior to the brand new Detroit transit system. So it really was seen in the eyes of mentors as a transformative development that people had a lot of energy, enthusiasm for. State Corporation Counsel, Condren Mallett. So really they're saying that this church that was supposed to be built, that has not been built, they're suing because it wasn't built in a timely manner. That's ridiculous.
That's what I'm saying.
The church is not a business. And what he said is that, you know what, we want to build this building, but we're going to build it in phases. We're not going to throw out money and get a loan. We don't want to own anything. That could be their point. I don't know if it is, but that could be his point. Like, when we get money, we'll put money into it as we need to. And when it gets finished, it gets finished. Or he could say, You know, we thought this was going to be something we could do relatively quickly, but because we don't want a big overhead on us, we're taking our time. This is not a business.
Right.
There's not loss of jobs because just because America doesn't mean it's a promise to jobs there. So it's not loss of jobs. It's not a loss of housing because the church is a church, not a housing area, right? There's not a loss of education or education for schools because we don't know if there's going to be a school there, but it doesn't mean there's a loss of it. So I don't understand what the city's suing for just because of time. Churches, it takes churches to finish what they want to finish. I guarantee you, if it was in Detroit, I guarantee you, if this was middle of nowhere, city and state, this was not going to be an issue.
I agree.
I guarantee you, this is because Detroit needs money. They're suing this church that probably has money to get some of their money because they can't tax them. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on.
Well, look who it is. Pastor Marvin. Everybody knows Pastor Marvin.
Yeah.
So they're going after his money. That's just what I'm thinking. But again, the whole thing about government going after churches. Here it is, a good example of it. I mean, you're suing a church because of your quota, or excuse me, your time frame mechanism, whatever. But like you said, stuff for a church takes time to build, but yet it didn't meet their expectations, so now they're going to sue you. I mean, that's like saying they're going to sue you, Root, because you didn't put an extension onto your church.
I promise to put an extension onto my church. They're going to. It's not even like the members are suing because you got money and it's not done. It is the city suing. It's the government again touching ground on the church. And I say that I think this is definitely, I think, a money grab. For me, I'm not going to announce what my church is because I don't want them coming after me now because I said it's a money grab. It's a money grab. So that part is. But let me just say again, once again, if you have any questions or comments that you want to share with us, please put into the chat right now so we can get to them. We also want to say thank you to our producers. We have our producers who've been working along with us over the last few years. Is Ken Walsh, Albert Minot. Also, we have our one of our social media producer who is Sean Gore, and also our strategic planner production is Peter Boynton. So we thank God for all the producers. We also have merchandise that we're going to be giving out, or not giving out, but selling. If you'd like to, please support us and help us with our merch. We have cups, mugs, hats, masks, shirts, hoodies, all those things, and you can give the request into the badmanforchrist@gmail.com, and then you can Zelle over the funds for the cost of it to the number that is below. We'd appreciate it. If you do not, or if you're not able to see all this, or you don't see it, but you want to buy something, you can always reach out to me. If you have my email or my phone number, but my email is revroopjr@gmail.com. You can also reach out to me also. So we love to have you support us with our Badman paraphernalia. Please join us, and help us out, and we appreciate it. All right, so let's talk about the big elephant in the room. We kind of had a Bible study on it today. Let's go right to it. Everybody, I hope you have your thoughts on this. If you're Bible believing, you probably have your thoughts. I hope you do. I hope you make your comment. So, the government wants to. It actually started with Obama, my good friend Barack Obama. The only thing I think that he did wrong, majorly wrong. Some minor things I think he did wrong, but majorly wrong, I think this. Now, I understand it that he made promises to this certain community, basically saying, vote for me, I will help get some of your laws passed. The LGBTQ community.
They hopped on that bad boy.
They are a very powerful group in the United States. And I stress the United States because really everywhere else in the world, they're not that powerful. In the United States, a very powerful group, very well established financially, and also integrated throughout all aspects, whether it be corporations, athletics, government, and now even the church.
Right. Right.
There are churches that, because of government pressure, have said that they're allowing, not, there's no problem with I have with them allowing them in the church, but allowing them in ministry. In churches that have traditionally, when you look at their background, did not or would not allow that community to be in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about inside the church. I'm not talking about volunteering for the food pantry or for cleanup. I'm talking about in ministry, teaching,
Right.
singing, playing,
Mm-hmm.
preaching.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the major roles of our belief system. What should the church, or how should the church react to some of the laws that were passed, i.e., civil union? How should we react to some of these rules that are being instituted by the government to affect, or maybe I'm trying to ask this question first, will they affect the church, and how?
I believe it will, because if you look at it, if the LGBT, that group, I hate even saying the acronym. I just hate saying it. Excuse me, I dislike saying that acronym because I say hate nowadays. That group has become so powerful, and they even try to make it seem like it's all part of civil rights, which is so funny. They try to encompass civil rights into their agenda, which we realize that is not part of civil rights. So their whole thing is saying, I have the right to do this. That's great, but what about my rights? What about my children's rights? Just because you want to live a certain lifestyle or try to project don't try to project it on me or my family. That's your choice. That's not my choice. And when it comes to the church, don't try to project your lifestyle into how a preacher or a congregation should conduct themselves, because you are there. You are there in the house of God. You should be abiding by what God says and not try to put binders on the man or woman of God who is preaching the truth. And the thing about it is, a lot of churches are not preaching the truth anymore because they're afraid of that agenda. They don't want their church to be shut down because of that particular agenda. So I think the churches have a major challenge. We were talking earlier about how it is. But again, I think it was you or someone brought the statement of making sure you have your bylaws in check so that when they try to bring forth that argument, you already have your bylaws in place that can dispute that.
Yeah, bylaws are important, but I think that um, there's a way for us as the church to handle this. I think, first of all, uniformity,
Uniformity.
being unified and synergistic in what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it is that you see these movements, and because pastors want to be part of something bigger than the kingdom itself, well, there's nothing bigger than the kingdom, but they think it's bigger than the kingdom, fame, fortune, money. When they have these powwows, you see ministers there. I remember there was something, I think in Washington, when Obama was signing the law or whenever it was, that there were tons of clergy standing in the midst, clapping to what was being signed. And that was a sign to the nation that the church is or should be backing this. And now when any church speaks against it, you're called hated or you have a hateful spirit.
Right.
You're non-tolerant.
Right.
And I think those are the things that scares pastors, because the generations that we have now, they need answers.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes just saying because the Bible says so isn't enough. But I think we have to come up with a uniform answer to the question, why not make it a 21st century answer using the Bible as our concept and precept, and let people know this is not about hate. It's not about being intolerable, but like you said, it's about us having our right to our value system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We do not hate these folks. We're not saying they cannot come into our doors and worship. But what we're saying is that we believe that if they come and they stay long enough, that seed that we're going to plant is going to change them, just like it changes anybody from an old creation to a new creation.
Absolutely.
And we believe that their thoughts that they have will change.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Mm-hmm.
they don't, well, then maybe this is not the right place for them. I'm not going to kick them out. I'm not going to tell them they cannot come. They may not receive membership because it may be uncomfortable. They're definitely not going to be doing ministry because I can allow that to be something that they could possibly spew from the sacred desk. Or if there's a school teacher and they're teaching our kids those
Mm-hmm.
things. Or if they're youth leader, they're teaching our youth these things. Because like you said, we have a right, and I add, we have a mandate, right, to tell folks that are under our care, this is what we believe.
Right. Right.
This is what we believe. It is our belief system, and we have a right to believe it. And the government wants to impose what we should believe.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think the line has to be drawn. The government should not tell the church what we ought to believe, because then you begin to dictate how the church should run.
Right.
And the church and state should be separate, because we are not telling the government how they should run. They do not tell us how we should run.
Right.
We follow their rules, we follow your laws, but man, don't tell us how we should run.
Mm-mm. And again, I think to your point, I think a lot of churches are afraid to speak up against that because, again, you're looking at some of the revenue that may be walking out the door. And there are some you've even seen this yourself, where you can turn on social media and you'll see churches that have the choir stands full of that particular lifestyle. You can identify it, you can see it because it's just so evident, but yet they still allow them to sing the songs or direct the choir or, again, hold office. I just shake my head and go, what are you doing? But again, it's all the fact about they don't want to lose their revenue.
Yeah, I think revenue is as a big play in it. Money has a big play. I don't think it's the only thing, but I definitely think it's major, because there is a lot of money in that community. But I think that there's also the fact that people don't know what to do, because, like we said, sometimes you find out after the fact. They're already in that position.
Yeah,
and they find out that, oh,
yeah.
by the way,
True.
Pastor, I want to let you know that I've changed. I'm no longer going to be Steve. I want to go and become Susan. What? What? I mean, that you find out all of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute. Well, Steve, I'm going to be Susan. No, you're always going to be Steve to me, because that's what God born you as, Steve. And I remember there was this guy. I don't know if he was a religious leader, but he was definitely somebody who was not against, but spoke to the issue with LGBTQTs. And he said, look, it's easy to find out if you're a man or a woman. He said, I don't know what everybody's arguing about, everybody's spewing about. It's simple. I go right to your chromosome. If you're XX, you're a man, you're a woman, I think it is. And if you're X, or you're a man, and if you're XY, you're a woman. So it is. I don't care what your outward appearance. And I remember it's all biblical. I don't care what your outward appearance is. I only have to look at what your inward appearance is. What does your DNA say? Are you XX or XY? Because that's only two choices you can be. Now, there have been people who say you can break it down to XXY and X, and all, but the fact of the matter is, you're either all X's or there's a Y in there, and that will dictate if you're. He said 100 years from now, he goes, you can claim to be whatever you want to be today, but 150 years from now, when you're dead and in your grave, I go to your bones. No one knows the way you looked. No one knows you're nothing but skeletons. I go to your bone, I graft it, I will take your DNA sample. I say, oh, this was either a man or a woman.
Right.
Not the way, because you can feel, and he was really good. I wish I'll pass it on to other people if they want to hear it, but this is because he said, you can say anything. You can say you're an alien, but the proof is in your DNA. Because you can say you're a dog, but the proof is in your DNA. and you cannot get away from that. So, because there's going to be a time when you're not going to be physically viable what you look like. Your bones are going to be there, and I'm going to be able to tell by your bones.
Mm-hmm. But, the sad thing about it is that agenda has creeped its way into everything. Into every show has to. I was watching a show the other day where, I'm not gonna mention the show, what the name of it was, but it was like the guy, invited another guy into his house, just to give him a place, to shelter and to eat. The next thing you know, you see the two kiss. I'm like, what? It's like, you can't see a show without seeing this. I'm like, they have basically gotten into every single network, every single television, even the cartoons.
About to say that.
Even the cartoons now are giving those subliminal messages to the children. And I just go, wow, that thing is so strong.
The cartoons, commercials, there's not one movie made now. There's not one LGBTQ relationship. There's not one movie made where there's not at least one. If there's relationships going on, one of them is going to be into that community. Your cartoons, commercials, where 25, 30 years ago, that was not in it at all. But now, because why? Filmmakers, the entertainment community is run by a lot of those individuals. Yeah. And they now say, this is the kind of movie, or the writers.
Yes, the writers.
Or the writers will write this. Simon Rollins, Bert and Ernie says,
he's right, though.
Bert and Ernie was the odd couple before. They were right. They were the odd couple. It was fine. They were manly men, but now people look at them and say, oh, maybe not. Maybe not. So it is crazy what 20 years ago or 25 years ago, our past had to worry about skimpy clothes, the swimsuit issue of SI, but now we have to worry about cartoons because a man or female and a female are holding hands or kissing. We got to tell our kids you can't watch that cartoon. How many times? How weird is it to say you can't watch that cartoon?
It's sad because even the Disney's famous for that, because like you remember the show The Proud Family. Right. Now the new Proud Family, my daughter's like, Dad, you don't look at that. The new Proud Family has now introduced that into their whole show. Now, whereas before when it first started out, they didn't have that stuff in there, but now it's like, what?
No way. And if it was, and back in the day with those shows, if it was a side joke and it wasn't there forever. Right. It was a side joke, but now it's sometimes the main theme of some of these shows.
It is.
The Flintstones, you didn't see it. You didn't see it in Bugs Bunny or Popeye.
Well, Bugs Bunny was questionable. There were some things that Bugs Bunny did. You were like,
Well, there was a rumor that a lot of Disney movies have subliminal things in them. I don't know. There's a website that talks about it, but it's weird. But let's just say that most cartoons back in the day, there was a defined female-male relationship.
Absolutely.
Today, it's not as defined, and the government has really been pushing the church, or been laying out laws not directly to the church, but can affect the church. Well, our time's almost up, Mark. I don't want to prolong it, but man, it was a good conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, folks. We thank you for joining us at the time. We know that it's busy Sunday night, but we appreciate you jumping on at 7:15. Mark, why don't you take us out, man?
Yeah, this was good conversation because I was so down today because my team just I'm not sorry about myself. But yeah, this was good conversation. It uplifted me. I was depressed earlier, but it uplifted me. So we want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Again, we don't take it for granted. You could be doing something else. So we pray that you have a blessed week, and we hope that Bishop Paul Brown will be with us the next time around.
We hope he recovers. You didn't come on today, so he's probably really sick. So I don't see him come on today. So we hope that he really recovers. We hope he really recovers. God bless you, everybody. Take care. Once again, see you next week. Same time, same bad channel. Love you all. God bless.
Good night, Simon.